these events, Ged knew nothing. For 4 weeks of that hot summer he lay blind and deaf and mute, though at times he moaned and cried out like an animal. At last, as the patient crafts of the master herbal worked their healing, his wounds began to close, and the fever left him. Little by little, he seemed to hear again, though he never spoke. On a clear day of autumn, the master herbal opened the shutters of the room where Ged lay. Since the darkness of that night on Rogue Knoll, he had known only darkness. Now he saw daylight and the sun shining. He hid his scarred face in his hands and wept. Still, when the winter came, he could speak only with a stammering tongue, and the master herbal kept him there in the healing chambers, trying to lead his body and mind gradually back to strength. It was early spring when at last the master released him, sending him first to offer his fealty to the archmage Genscher, for he had not been able to join all the others of the school in his duty when Genscher came to Roke. None of his companions had been allowed to visit him in the months of his sickness, and now, as he passed, some of them asked one another, "Who is that?" He had been light and lithe and strong. Now, lamed by pain, he went hesitantly and did not raise his face, the left side of which was white with scars. He avoided those who knew him and those who did not, and made his way straight to the court of the fountain. There, where once he had waited Nimmerling, Genscher awaited him. Like the old archmage, the new one was cloaked in white, but like most men of Way and the East Reach, Genscher was black-skinned, and his look was black, under thick brows. Ged knelt and offered him fealty and obedience. Genscher was silent a while. "I know what you did," he said at last, "but not what you are. I cannot accept your fealty." Ged stood up and set his hand on the trunk of the young tree beside the fountain to steady himself. He was still very slow to find words. "Am I to leave Roke, my lord?" "Do you want to leave Roke?" "No." "What do you want?" "To stay, to learn, to undo the evil." Nemmerly himself could not do that. "No, I would not let you go from Roke. Nothing protects you but the power of the masters here and the defenses laid upon this island that keep the creatures of evil away. If you left now, the thing you loosed would find you at once and enter into you and possess you. You would be no man, but a Gebeth, a puppet, doing the will of that evil shadow which you raised up into the sunlight. You must stay here until you gain strength and wisdom enough to defend yourself from it, if you ever do. Even now it waits for you. Assuredly, it waits for you. Have you seen it since that night?" "In dreams, Lord." After a while, Ged went on, speaking with pain and shame. "Lord Genscher, I do not know what it was, the thing that came out of the spell and cleaved to me. Nor do I know. It has no name. You have great power inborn in you, and you used that power wrongly, to work a spell over which you had no control, not knowing how that spell affects the balance of light and dark, life and death, good and evil. And you were moved to do this by pride and by hate. Is it any wonder the result was ruin? You summoned a spirit from the dead, but with it came one of the powers of unlife. Uncalled it came from a place where there are no names. Evil it wills to work evil through you. The power you had to call it gives it power over you. You are connected. It is the shadow of your arrogance, the shadow of your ignorance, the shadow you cast. Has a shadow a name?" Ged stood sick and haggard. He said at last, "Better I had died." "Who are you to judge that, you for whom Nemmerle gave his life? You are safe here. You will live here and go on with your training. They tell me you were clever. Go on and do your work. Do it well. It is all you can do." So Genscher ended and was suddenly gone, as is the way of mages. The fountain leaped in the sunlight, and Ged watched it a while and listened to its voice, thinking of Nemmerle. Once in that court he had felt himself to be a word spoken by sunlight. Now the darkness also had spoken a word that could not be unsaid. He left the court, going to his old room in the South Tower, which they had kept empty for him. He stayed there alone. When the gong called to supper, he went, but he would hardly speak to the other lads at the long table or raise his face to them, even those who greeted him most gently. So after a day or two, they all left him alone. To be alone was his desire, for he feared the evil he might do or say unwittingly. Neither Vetch nor Jasper was there, and he did not ask about them. The boys he had led and lorded over were all ahead of him now because of the months he had lost, and that spring and summer he studied with lads younger than himself. Nor did he shine among them, for the words of any spell, even the simplest illusion charm, came halting from his tongue, and his hands faltered at their craft. In autumn, he was to go once again to the isolate tower to study with the master namer. This task, which he had once dreaded, now pleased him, for silence was what he sought, and long learning where no spells were wrought, and where that power which he knew was still in him would never be called upon to act. The night before he left for the tower, a visitor came to his room, one wearing a brown traveling cloak and carrying a staff of oak shod with iron. Ged stood up at the sight of the wizard's staff. "Sparrowhawk." At the sound of the voice, Ged raised his eyes. It was Vetch standing there, solid and foursquare as ever, his black, blunt face older, but his smile unchanged. On his shoulder crouched a little beast, brindle-furred and bright-eyed. "He stayed with me while you were sick, and now I'm sorry to part with him, and sorrier to part with you, Sparrowhawk. But I'm going home. Here, Hog, go to your true master." Vetch patted the otak and set it down on the floor. It went and sat on Ged's pallet and began to wash its fur with a dry brown tongue like a little leaf. Vetch laughed, but Ged could not smile. He bent down to hide his face, stroking the otak. "I thought you wouldn't come to me, Vetch," he said. He did not mean any reproach, but Vetch answered, "I couldn't come to you. The master herbal forbade me, and since winter I've been with the master in the grove, locked up myself. I was not free until I earned my staff. Listen, when you too are free, come to the East Reach. I will be waiting for you. There's good cheer in the little towns there, and wizards are well received." "Free," Ged muttered, and shrugged a little, trying to smile. Vetch looked at him, not quite as he had used to look, with no less love, but more wizardry, perhaps. He said gently, "You won't stay bound on rope forever." "Well, I have thought, perhaps, I may come to work with the master in the tower, to be one of those who seek among the books and the stars for lost names, and so do no more harm, if not much good." "Maybe," said Vetch. "I am no seer, but I see before you not rooms and books, but far seas, and the fire of dragons and the towers of cities, and all such things a hawk sees when he flies far and high. And behind me, what do you see behind me?" Ged asked, and stood up as he spoke so that the wear-light that burned overhead between them sent his shadow back against the wall and floor. Then he turned his face aside and said, stammering, "But tell me where you will go, and what you will do." I will go home to see my brothers and the sister you have heard me speak of. I left her a little child, and soon she'll be having her naming. It's strange to think of. And so I'll find me a job of wizardry somewhere among the little isles. Oh, I would stay and talk with you, but I can't. My ship goes out tonight, and the tide is turned already. Sparrowhawk, if your way lies east, come to me. And if ever you need me, send for me. Call on me by my name, Astariel." At that, Ged lifted his scarred face, meeting his friend's eyes. "Astariel," he said. "My name is Ged." Then quietly they bade each other farewell, and Vetch turned and went down the stone hallway and left Rope. Ged stood still a while, like one who has received a great news, and must enlarge his spirit to receive it. It was a great gift that Vetch had given him, the knowledge of his true name. No one knows a man's true name but himself and his Namer. He may choose at length to tell it to his brother, or his wife, or his friend, and yet even those few will never use it where any third person may hear it. In front of other people they will, like other people, call him by his use name, his nickname, such a name as Sparrowhawk and Vetch and Ogeon, which means fur cone. If plain men hide their true name from all but a few they love and trust utterly, so much more must wizardly men, being more dangerous and more endangered. Who knows a man's name holds that man's life in his keeping. Thus to Ged, who had lost faith in himself, Vetch had given that gift only a friend can give, the proof of unshaken, unshakable trust.